Hi, I'm Melissa Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. Today I'm going to give you a tutorial on how to make a pendant employing the use of Pepe's center positioning dies. What these are going to do is allow you to make perfectly centered washers every time. If you've ever tried to do that without these centering punches, you will know that it's very difficult to get your washers exactly perfect with that hole just right in the center. Otherwise, a lot of times I end up with my hole slightly off to the side, up or down, whatever. But today I'm going to show you how to take care of that. Pepe centering positioning dies are meant to go along with their disc cutters, so the sizes correlate. There are 10 dies, however there are 11 disc cutters. And that is because you won't need to have one for the tiniest one. Each of the dies are machined from solid steel and coated with a black oxide, which will help prevent rusting. But it's still a good idea for you to keep these in a dry spot or keep them oiled for storage when you're not using them. To use the centering punches, the first thing I need to do is to cut the inner diameter of my washer that I'm going to create. So I'm going to decide which size I want. In this case, I'm going to use this 5/8 inch hole. So I'm going to prepare my metal, get it laid out in here. Make certain that I have enough room here for the size of washer that I'm going to make. Then I'm going to take my die or my punch. I'm going to just roll the edge a little bit in the lubricant. Just kind of makes it so that it helps keep this edge sharp. Makes it so that this will cut a little bit easier. Then I'm going to take a heavy hammer. In this case, I have a 1 pound brass hammer. I'm going to move my hands out of the way. I want to strike dead on the head of this punch here. Shouldn't take too much to get through. You'll notice that I'm also doing this on a pad of urethane. I want to have something to kind of soften the blow if I happen to punch all the way through on top of my metal so that I don't crush my metal. At this point, I'm just going to move my piece off to the side. And now I need to make certain that this hole is perfectly centered. So I want to make a 1 inch washer. And what I do is I bring this in, I'm going to hold up the top part of my plate, take my 1 inch centering plug or centering die, center positioning die, just lay it in here, and you'll notice that it moved my metal in. And at that point I can go ahead and drop this down, rock it around a little bit if you need to, just to make sure that your metal is pulled into place. Double check your edges, make sure that you're not out of position anywhere. You'll see here everything is actually perfectly centered. So at this point I'm ready to pull out my disc cutter. Again, I'm just going to roll it in a little bit of a lubricant, place it into the hole, and hammer it out. And I now have a perfectly centered washer. Now that I have my washers created, I can begin to embellish them. In this case, I'm going to create a hammered edge using a very sharp texturing hammer that I have. But any kind of hammer will do. You're just going to get different effects based off of what you choose. So I'm going to come in and just hammer around this. And as I do this, it's going to spread the metal in between my hammer blows because I'm pinching the metal between a piece of steel and a steel block, which is the hammer head and the block. So it's going to stretch, and you'll see that it kind of ripples, and you just kind of have to work around that. But we're going to use that to our advantage as one of our design elements when we're finished. So I'm going to go ahead and just speed this little part of the video up, so I'm not really hammering that fast, although it would be kind of fun. So you can see here that the metal is beginning to stretch, and because of that it starts to deform and changes its shape a little bit. And it will get worse as I go around the washer here. Okay. So you can see that my washer is pretty deformed at this point, but we have a beautiful texture that's on it. So it's been spread out. It's a lot larger than what we started with, And again, that's because we've done a lot of that stretching. So you can either use your fingers, which may be difficult depending on how thick your material is, to kind of bend this around, or you can use pliers to kind of help to come in and just create some different waves or undulations in your metal. So I might just walk my pliers around, use my fingers to push up against them, and there we have kind of a wavy pendant. And you can play with this a little bit more to add more or less waves depending on how deep you want those. So there's the top part of our pendant. Now the next part of the pendant, what I'm going to do is take the inside circle that I had for this, and I'm going to texture this up as well, and then I might dap it, or I might again start to play around with folding it a little bit. Just kind of depends on what you want. Another thing to keep in mind is that if your metal is thicker, then it's going to have a lot more movement than if it's thinner. I happen to be working with 24 gauge sterling silver, so there's really not a lot of metal here to move. But again, the thicker that it is, then the easier it's going to be. Now, because I'm going to be hammering on a very small disc here, one little tip I can give you is to take a pencil eraser and hold your piece down as you hammer. And that keeps your fingers out of the way, less hitting of your fingers, which is nice when it comes to a hammer because you don't want to do that much either. So I'm just going to come in, and again, I'm going to work my way around this little disc to texture it up as well. Okay, now again, because we have been shaping this with a hammer, the shape of my circle has changed and it's no longer a perfect circle. And that is okay, because that is what I want for this particular project. In this case, I am going to dome this. Now, because again, this metal is a little thinner and I'm not going to dome it too much, I do not need to anneal it. However, annealing will make it much easier for you to shape this. So for this next section, I'm going to use a dapping set and a doming block. So I'll pull my doming block out. And what I'm going to do is, first you want to find which hole this will fit into. And depending on how shallow or deep you want your dome to be, you will just pick a different one of your dapping holes. In this case, I don't want it to be too domed. Okay, and I want the texture so that that's facing forward. So I want that textured inside of that dome. The next thing you would do is you would pick one of your daps to see if it fits. Now in this case, I happen to know this is too large. You want to make sure that your dap closely fits into the hole here. So we're going to take another, just kind of try a few of them out to see which ones fit the best. So that one actually fits really well in here, and that's the one I'm going to use. It's going to take my disc, place it in there in the center as much as possible. Again, you'll remember that we changed the shape of it a little bit, so it's no longer perfectly circle. We're going to place this right here into the center. And just bring that down. Take your disc out, see if it's the shape that you want. If not, you can place it back in here a little bit and play around until you get it the way you'd like it. I'm pretty happy with this right now, so we'll go with that. Now that I have everything textured up and ready to go, what I've done is just taken a Sharpie and marked on to my two pieces where I want going to punch a hole. I'm just going to use a little hole punching plier that I have. And I'm going to punch two holes in each of these, one in the top and the bottom. With these hole punching pliers, you never want to just pull your piece off. You need to kind of work it off so as to not damage the punching pin. So you want to be careful with that. Obviously, you can also drill these as well, but if you don't have a drill, then you do have a couple of different options. All right. Once you have your holes drilled, you can either then connect them with your jump rings, or in this case, I'm going to also be adding 2 embellishments with my little coin pearls that I have here. So I've got some little head pins. I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a top loop, or the wrap loop for the top pearl that's going to go in here. So I'll just really quickly wrap this. What this does is makes my pearl secure, and it won't just come off if somebody happens to pull on it. Straighten that up a little bit. How do I do that? Well, that's a different video altogether. So stay tuned for that one, and we can show you how to do wrapped loops, or there's lots of tutorials out there. You can find that. For my bottom one, I'm going to do my wrap loop just slightly different. So rather than creating a stem that I wrap around, I'm just going to bend this down kind of at the neck right away, rather than creating that stem. Switch over to my round nose pliers. You'll see that it's already wrapped just right at the base of this pearl here. Switch back to a flat inside edged pliers, in this case my needle nose. I'm going to go ahead and wrap around like I did before on the other loop. But this time I'm going to bring this down, around, onto the face of the pearl. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a little curl that kind of loops back up and around. So I'm going to use the very tip of my round nose pliers to start that curl. So you can see right there, I've just kind of started a little loop. I'm going to kind of pinch that in here together so it comes all the way down and touches itself. And I'm going to create a sweet little spiral here. And it rests just right there like such onto my pearl. So I can get that to hold still. So now I'm ready to assemble everything. Okay, so now we've already textured up our piece, and what I've done is just drilled a couple of holes or punched them in with pliers, however you want to do that. And I've wrapped 2 pearls so that they have a top loop and can be inserted into my piece using jump rings. So now I'm going to use my jump rings. When you're using a jump ring, you never want to pull it open. Okay, because if you pull it open, you'll never get it back to being straight again. So what you want to do is just kind of twist it open. So at this point, I'm going to place the top one, and I'm also going to insert my top pearl. To close this, I'm just going to come back and twist it closed again and get that joint as tight as possible. And now I have my pearl dropped inside the center of my washer. I'm going to attach the center piece. So I'm going to insert my top piece and then the center piece, and again close up that washer. So now I have the first and second tier of my piece. And the last part, I'm going to take my jump ring again, open that up, and I'm going to insert my pearl Again, close my washer. And we now have our completed pendant ready to go.